Another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And it is Friday, so welcome to Unfiltered Friday, where we take the discussion deeper than any corner office. Yeah, I'm going to tell you what I really think. So, let's get on with it. I think I mentioned in some posts that we were going to talk about the VA or the Veterans Administration today. Um, what's going on with them? And we got the longest government shutdown in history going on. Is that partially to blame? Or has the VA just been a total clusterfuck for its entirety? I think it's gone through stages. And I think where, location wise, also plays a point. That's why I say this is kind of a discussion. I want to hear from others, from listeners, your experience with the VA. So, I am a veteran, but I do not personally use the VA for my healthcare needs. However, my working with veterans, um, my father goes to the VA. Buck, who was the veteran I lived with, who was 97, went to the VA. Another gentleman we care for gets some assistance through the VA. Um, actually, yeah. And there was another one. Charles. Yeah, Charles in charge. He's still with us in life, but no longer with my wife and I, as it relates to us caring for him. An old cantankerous bastard, 100%. Retired burglary detective, 80 something years old, wasn't allowed to use public transportation because he gave the bus driver the bird. Yeah. So you can be old and still be an asshole. I suspect he was an asshole detective. Um, yeah. But enough about him, and let's go on to the VA. So, my dad's been going to the VA for quite some time. And when he lived in Galveston, I guess he had a good experience there. Um, Maybe it was much more accessible in the Galveston area. I don't know if it was Galveston, Houston, how it worked. But, here in East Texas, they built a new facility and it is not staffed very well. All kinds of problems. And I'm kind of curious as to why. Trying to figure out, is it a location thing? Is it just the VA? Is it this area? What is the deal? But, essentially, how we met Buck was he receives some VA benefits through like home health care, where the VA would pay for um, assistance. He was 97, so my wife would go over for like, he was approved for, I think, 9 or 11 hours a week or something. I don't know. It was a certain amount. And my wife would go over, take them shopping, clean, cook, whatever, help them run errands, take them to the bank. And that's how we ended up with Buck. Um, they'd cut some of his hours, but essentially that's how we met and how we ended up becoming his live-in caregivers. Um, but he was at he had a certain amount of hours and then they cut him. And then there's been, I know my dad had 44 hours and they cut him to like 11, I believe. There was another gentleman we were helping out. Same, I think 44 hours to 11. And, we're talking about people who need serious care, people who can't even get out of the bed by themselves. Um, yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. One of the gentlemen we helped, they cut his hours, and, the person who was there helping all the time just couldn't afford to stay only working 11 hours when she was used to getting 40 or 44. And, not only did that kind of put a strain on her, but it put additional strain on the family because now they needed somebody. And we stepped in temporarily, but man, that was back last year in February. And, you know, the issue with that is, I mean, he had so few hours that basically kind of my thing was to go over and get him out of the bed at like 5:30 or 6 in the morning every day because his wife just couldn't get him out of the bed. Um, and normally the person they did have would be there, get him out of the bed, make his breakfast, get him dressed, take him for a walk, do laundry, all kinds of stuff. And now all of a sudden this fell to the wife. Um, and I believe, I don't know if she was retired yet, or she ended up retiring, but yeah, essentially, I don't think he could be left home alone by himself for too long. But yeah, so it kind of started with all this cutting of hours, is what it seemed like. That was kind of one of the first things. And this is when Biden was still in office. So, um, yeah, cutting of the hours was the first thing. And then, like, the second part of it was, um, like we do my father. Um, then they were, I think, saying, like, oh, it couldn't be family that helps out. It needs to be a stranger. Well, I don't know about you, but, most people would prefer that a family member care for them, maybe not a stranger. I think it depends, um, on what it is, but, you know, do you want a stranger in your house every day for 8 hours? I don't know. Should they pay family members to take care of the elderly? I mean, kind of the way the model works that is set up is, I think it depends culturally, but kind of the way the health model system is set up is that, essentially your parents age, you can't take care of them, you send them to an assisted living place. And these assisted living places typically will take all your money and your insurance. And once that runs dry, they'll put you on Medicaid. And they can continue to bleed the state or the government for money, to house you, feed you, change you, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's kind of how it works. Is they'll make you use up all your retirement, all your savings, and then once that's done, and insurance and whatnot, and you can no longer afford it, they'll put you on government assistance, and they'll continue to get paid because that's what it's all about. But think of it in terms of if you come from a culture or you can't afford it, um, to put people in assisted living, then family members got to care for them. Some family members want to, some family members don't. Um, and then that requires time, effort, money. I mean, there was a point where, when my daughter was young and my wife stayed home and we had my grandparents with us, and my wife would help them because she was able to. But if you were to think about now, um, how would it be? If you have both people that work, who would care for the family members? What are your choices? I mean, you have to pay somebody to come in and care for them, or you have to put them in assisted living, or one family member has to stay home and care for them. I mean, it's no different than childcare. You know, the first few years of life for children till they can go to school, you have to send them to daycare. They can't do things for themselves. They can't cook for themselves. They can't change their own diapers, all that kind of stuff. And so adults in the later years in life get that way as well. So typically, people with benefits, um, sometimes veterans, the VA will allot them a certain number of hours to have hired help come in and do some of these caregiving activities, be it their laundry, take them errands, whatnot, because, some are wounded, some can't walk. They need walkers, they need scooter chairs. Like my dad's got a scooter chair. We had to have our vehicle fitted with a lift, in order to lift the scooter chair. So yeah, there's it's multifaceted, I guess if you will. But yeah, the VA is good about really good about, hey, if you need this, we'll get you the lift. We'll get you the scooter chair. We'll get your meds. We'll get your supplies. I mean, that was one of the biggest things with Buck was, needing adult diapers, needing catheter bags, his medication. They were very good about sending all that, all the supplies. Life alert, blood pressure cuffs, pill containers, pill cutters, chucks, diapers, which all that stuff is expensive. It'll eat you alive if you don't have the health insurance plans that pay for that kind of stuff. If you have to pay for it out of pocket. So they come in handy there, but where they don't come in handy is in the service department. Yeah. I mean, we're grateful that they did the lift, but it took many times to get that done, as they would run short on manpower and have to cancel, reschedule. But yeah, going there in person, I told this story last year when it happened. When I took Buck there, when he first got discharged, I took him to see his primary care doctor at the VA so they could prescribe therapy, do this, do that, talk about when we're going to take the catheter out. And of course, when we got there, we had trouble getting there, of course, initially because the Medicab, the girl gave us wrong information and told us, I'll just call the day of when you need a 24-hour reservation. So that was hell, actually getting him there. And then when I got there, I needed help to get him in, and nobody would help except for the one security officer, while the other one sat back and pissed and moaned and complained. So that was that. And thought I heard someone. Um, but we got there, and it was basically the nurse just asking us questions. What did he need? And like I said, they come in clutch for that kind of stuff. Really good. But I was highly disappointed that it was merely a nurse visit. And they had talked about sending out an occupational therapist for a home health safety checklist visit. Well, they could have asked all these questions there. They could have done all this over the phone, like, hey, you need to continue to receive diapers, chucks, and the stuff that he was already getting, but he needed some new stuff. He was going to need potentially a wheelchair, which he fought. They got him his hospital bed, trapeze bar to pull himself up. Um, some other things, big equipment that was needed. I believe oxygen. Um, man, what else was it? Nebulizer, anything you might need. But yeah, it was a lot of effort for, you know, what ended up merely being a nurse visit. Now, where do I want to go from here? So my father was recently in the hospital for a week, and he was discharged with some new medications and whatnot. And normally the VA would fill this kind of stuff. And but it has to be like shipped and mailed, and you have to have a prescription, of course. Um, but here's where kind of the issue comes in, is that my dad, he said that for the longest, he was only seeing like APCs, which are like your PAs and nurse practitioners, um, like advanced practice clinicians, APPs, advanced practice providers. People call them all kinds of different things. Not an MD or DO. I believe they had a couple of APPs, APCs, and maybe one supervising doctor, which he ended up leaving. And that's kind of where we get into the problems. Is, if he is the primary care doctor there and he leaves, then there's nobody there to take over the management of these patients' prescriptions and whatnot. And you're like, oh, there's other doctors there. Well, I had to go, like, we were able to get like a temporary prescription of these new ones from Walmart, like a 30-day supply that gives the VA enough time to um, mail the prescriptions, get them on the mail service. So they come in like a 3 month supply at a time on a regular basis. And so I take them up there and I am going to talk to the pharmacy lady about, hey, let's get this situated. And she's like, well, one of the problems is that, you know, his physician is leaving. But not just that, there are three providers leaving, to include the medical director there. And for those of you who don't know, the medical director is like the supervising physician. He supervises all the physicians, all the ABCs, typically of a site, of a facility, um, and is kind of responsible. He's, you know, oversees, signs off on, because like your nurse practitioners and PAs, let's say if they write you a controlled substance, Tylenol 3 or Xanax, something like that, the doctor has to go back and like second sign that to make sure. So they often end up with additional work, which is why they're paid, you know, an additional fee or whatever you want to call it for uh, supervising. But it's a lot more work, you know. Um, so he's got to see all his patients, and then of course he's got to review anything that the people he supervises have sent to him. So it ends up being a ton of work. And then, of course, if you're the medical director, then you have that, but on a much larger scale. So, yeah, it's like, and I don't know if the medical director there, you know, I don't think it's just that facility. I think it's an area. We live in East Texas. So it could be like Longview, surrounding areas. Um, to be like Longview, Tyler, Lindell, anywhere in between. Anywhere that might actually have their own little locations between the Tyler, Longview, and Dallas Fort Worth area. So I'm guessing, he's got more responsibilities, or she. But that medical director, it's not just a matter of sliding somebody in and, you know, taking over all this doctor's patients. I mean, my understanding was this was the only doctor at that site. If they have three other providers leaving, if that was his, might have been my father's doctor, the only doctor at the site, and maybe two of the um, advanced practice providers, and now the medical director. Or maybe the medical director, my dad's doctor, and one APC, leaving one nurse practitioner. But regardless of the combination, let's just say that it's not beneficial, to say the least. You're leaving a ton of veterans out there just hanging in the wind. It's, man, you know, my dad was supposed to have like an appointment in December. Normally it'd be like labs a week before and then an appointment. Now they've like moved everything to November. They're like, well, we're gonna get labs and then we're gonna do like a video visit. And yeah. So I guess they're gonna be, you know, I think they offered him a phone call or video, and he said maybe a phone call because he wasn't set up for video. But you know, Buck, he didn't have a cell phone. He had a landline. He didn't have a webcam on his computer, but we could use my laptop. But the point I'm trying to make is that you have all these people in a certain demographic. They're not super tech savvy. I mean, losing the providers is a problem, period. First they cut the hours, so people who need assistance are getting less assistance, putting more strain on the families. Because if a family member's got to take off, then yeah, it's costing them. They're having to take off to take them to appointments. If we didn't have the life we have, it would be very difficult. If I didn't do Uber and podcast, if I had a 9 to 5, if my wife had a 9 to 5, it would put a whole different level of strain on the strain we already have, like with my father, as it relates to taking care of him, taking him to appointments. I mean, we just spent a week in the hospital, and Monday we had to do something or go somewhere. Tuesday we had an appointment. Um, Whether, what was yesterday? Wednesday. I still had to come in and get medicine and do other things for him. So yeah, it's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. All 3 days were spent doing post follow up things, whether it's getting medications, trying to get the pharmacy at the VA to pick up something. Um, but man, why is the VA having trouble attracting providers? I mean, the healthcare system's screwed up enough. And I know the VA hasn't been great. I guess unless you go to some of these places like, They always talk about like NICO and the Intrepid Center and, these places where you have the big rehabs and stuff like that. I hear those places are great, but, you know, in bigger cities, maybe Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, um, where they offer more services, perhaps have more providers, maybe it's a little better. But in these smaller towns, I mean, you have a brand new facility with that they can't staff. They can't offer the PT. They can't offer. There's so many sections that are just not even operating. Um, Empty space not being utilized. So, I find it interesting in that you have, I guess, the VA, Department of Veteran Affairs. Um, yes, the Department of Defense when you're active duty. Now the Department of War. But once you're done, I guess you're managed by the Department of the Veterans Administration. But I would think that that would kind of roll up under somewhere into the Department of War, like taking care of the warriors. I mean, how well do they take care of the active duty people? I haven't talked to an active duty person in a while, but they're not going without. But now you have the people who come back beaten, battered, injured. They need assistance. The VA is notorious for throwing pills at people, which if you need them, that's great. Supplies, like I said, great. But the assistance, the help, that's where the issue lies. Cutting the hours, you know, people need the help, and then the people working need the job, need to put food on the table. So you're fucking over two people each time. I mean, it made a difference of, my wife and I taking care of maybe one person apiece to several people, nickel and diming. And that's the thing is, like I told the home health people I work for, like, I'm not taking 11 hours this person, 11 hours this person, and having to go see three people every day, and spend my whole day like, getting up at 4 so I can get one out of bed at 5:30, spending hours with him so the person can get some rest, and then, you know, having to go to the next person, which I was having to do. Um, and then there was my dad. So, you're having to take care of three people just to make 33 hours, go three different places, almost, you know, some daily, some every other. But yeah. And if, like Buck, luckily for him, he was well to do from his retirement, and he was able to pay us out of pocket because he was only approved for 11 hours. But, you know, that was the sad thing was we even wrote appeal letters. Um, he could not get out of the bed and was still only approved for 11 hours. I mean, how? How can you deny that? So he paid us a certain amount. It wasn't a lot. It seems like a lot, but if I told you the whole amount, but what it worked out to was like $6 and 37 cents an hour. Wasn't a ton for 24/7 care. And then the 11 hours, you know, and with the VA, that's like 12 or $13 an hour. It's not a lot. So, yeah. But yeah, when I was walking over there to get the prescriptions thing, and I was talking to the lady, and she's telling me, she's there doing her best because she's fielding calls, and I wasn't the only one with these kinds of questions. With this doctor leaving, who now is going to manage all these people? So, my experience coming from a not for profit healthcare model and managing primary care, typically the way primary care works, like if you're familiar with healthcare or not, let me explain it to you a little bit. You know, you're a patient, you go get your healthcare from a primary care physician, your PCP. They'll often ask you, or on your insurance plan, you have to have a PCP or primary care physician. They're usually going to be an internal medicine or family medicine doctor. And what they do is they're responsible for managing like your health, your kind of big health picture. You, in general, as a person, like high blood pressure, diabetes, this, that, the other. Now, if you have a specific issue, they may refer you to a specialist like a cardiologist if you have heart problems, an orthopedist if you broke something, a rheumatologist if you need them, um, maybe a pain physician, maybe a sleep doctor, all kinds of things. But back in primary care, you still manage kind of the big picture and you work with all these other specialty groups. So, you know, let's say I have my doctor manages my high blood pressure, anxiety, whatever. But if I had cardiology, a cardiologist, heart problem, they would send me to cardiology. Let's say cardiology puts me on a med, you know, that goes in my chart. My primary care physician knows about it and they're aware. And now, they have to go, oh, your cardiologist put you on this. I have you on this blood pressure medication. Maybe we want to switch to this one because it works better. But you get the gist. They're your kind of general manager of your healthcare picture. So, when I worked, um, like one of the clinics I managed, we had um, maybe two physicians and three APCs, I think, and an urgent care. But typically, the way it would work is like, let's say you had your main doctor and he supervises one nurse practitioner, one PA. Then we had a second doctor who supervised one of them as well, or a different one. But your physicians and your APCs would each have like a patient panel. Now, let's say the doctor has a patient panel of 3,800 people. That's quite a few people. And then each APC has, one was part time. Maybe she'd been there 10 years, like 1,800 people. And the other one had about 2,300 people. Um, so you have to remember, even though they're paneled to the nurse practitioner or whatever, or the PA, they're still kind of sub-paneled under the doctor and added to their panel because there are certain things that the physician is required to sign off on as it relates to the treatment. And I want to say that even if you're seeing the APC, that you might end up seeing the physician every once in a while. Um, so, I think used to kind of the model was in a way like, let's say you had your doctor, and if you weren't able to see the doctor, you would see the nurse practitioner because the doctor was too busy or something. Um, but now, I think when I was there and kind of now, maybe like, I think used to it's like your APCs weren't allowed to be your PCP, like the supervising physician was technically your PCP, but you were seeing the nurse practitioner because the doctor was unavailable. But then eventually, I think it just became like, no, my provider is the nurse practitioner. I see them and not the doctor. Um, so it was like that for a long time. But you have to look at it, you know, on a from a top down view. If you're on the business end of things at the very top, you're always looking at growth. And this is where um, my lead physician and the upper management would always butt heads. It's like, if you're not growing, you're dying. Grow, grow, grow. You got to grow. You got to keep adding more people. And he's like, fucking can't add any more people. Like, okay, like, look, I have a panel that's this big. Then I manage two other people. Their panels are this big. So it's like between three of them, there's 6,000 or more people, 7,000 people. Um, what are the options? It's like you can add another APC. So now, yeah, they can take more people and he can add patients that way, manage. That's growth. Um, what else was it? But then there also comes in access. Like if your patient panel's so big and they want you to have a certain level of access, like they would say like your third available appointment needs to be, like at one time I can remember we were working on access. Um, if you wanted to see the lead physician, you were a patient of his third available was 80 something days out, meaning his first available was probably 20 something days out, and the second was probably about 30s to 40s. Meaning, if you call the office and you need an appointment to see him specifically, unless there's a cancellation, it's probably going to be 3 weeks. So, a lot of people who are sick would often be like, oh, well, is the nurse practitioner available? I'll see them. Um, or they would come to urgent care when we had one before we shut it down in COVID. So, it was, you know, him having a big panel was good for other people because it gave them a chance. But you have patients that specifically want to see him, and therefore they don't want to see the nurse practitioner or the PA. Um, and so access was always kind of this point of contention. You know, you can't keep growing and shrink the access. You can't keep adding people and then expect that, they want their third available to be within like 7 to 10 days, I think it was. Meaning that if you call, you're going to be able to see your doctor within 7 to 10 days, the doctor you want. So, yeah, there's kind of a duality there. I think we talked about it in book club, like choke points. What are your choke points? What are these points of, constraint? And I think we use like Chick-fil-A drive-through as an example of, you can only go as fast as how fast you can take the orders, how many people you got to take the food, how many people, there's always at some point there becomes a factor where you have to add another person to accept more, to grow. So that was always an interesting concept for me as the manager and trying to be supportive and trying to take on the business mindset and wanting to promote and be a director, VP, and possibly CEO one day. You have to think of it in that growth mindset, but then there was kind of the logical side of it too of talking to the physician like, what is wrong with being okay with enough? Like, I have almost 4,000 patients by myself. You know, they can't even all get in to see me when they want to. Why are you trying to make more? Like, I already see this many a day. I'm already charting takes up all my time. You know, we could run reports and, it's like he works all day. Maybe he goes and coaches or spends time with family, but then by the time all that's done, it's home and it's charting till midnight, 1 in the morning, sometimes 2 in the morning. I can remember being at this thing and they were showing us like where you could run a report and see the usage outside of business hours of the electronic medical records and when people were logged in. And you could see your physicians having to work late or early in the morning, wake up early before they came in because they want, you know, not only that, not only are you seeing all the patients, then you got to finish the charting. You got to sign the chart. You got to complete the chart. Um, you know, they want charts completed within 3 days. And, you might have 80 something charts open because you got to finish the notes. Um, yeah, there is a lot of stuff. It's a lot of work. You know, you're answering messages like when you call and you're like, "Hey, I got to send a message to the doctor or whatever." The nurse transcribes your message, sends it to the doctor. The doctor answers it, sends it back to them and says, maybe that's when you get a call like, "Okay, stop taking this and add a baby aspirin." So not only are they answering all that kind of stuff, but then they're finishing closing charts. And then they're signing off on, you know, like if I saw the nurse practitioner and she had to prescribe me something that required his signature, he's got to sign off on that, whether it's manually and then the nurse faxes it, or it's done electronically. But the point I'm trying to get across is that it's a lot of fucking work, you know? Like people go to medical school, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. You do your internship where you're working 80 plus hours a week, and then you get out, and now all of a sudden, like you think it's coast mode. Now you get to make your six figures because typically, like, let's say you get out, um, the hospital system I worked for your first year, they would give you a guarantee. Like, let's say you're going to make $110,000 this year, regardless of how many patients you see. And that's to give you the time to build a patient panel. Um, where you go on productivity. And I guess when you go on productivity, maybe you get like a base salary, but then according to how many patients you see and bill out, whatever, um, you get paid that way. But there's also a certain expectation that the system wants you to have, you know, whether it's, I think your first little while you'll get an hour a patient, then they cut it to 30 and then 20, but ideally, like your patient slots, your appointment times are typically no longer than 15 to 20 minutes because they really need to be seeing, you know, 18, 19 patients a day, but closer to the 22 to 25. If somebody has 12 to 13, that's like a half day, slow day. Although some providers who would take too long, they'd be like, well, my patients are super complicated and they're old, and, that's why it takes me a long time and I'm always behind, and my charts are always behind. And yeah, it becomes a whole deal. People get out of medical school and they're like, oh, time to sit back and relax. The hard part's over. No, now the real fucking work begins. Because now it's never going to stop. Now it's 24/7. So, yeah, you have this one physician at the VA, overwhelmed, no help. Why? Are they not? Is the VA not paying them competitively enough? Surely they're offering some sort of benefit to be a doctor for the VA. Um, I mean, surely it's not $70,000 a year. I'm sure it's competitive, six figures, I would hope. Maybe they don't bonus and stuff like that. Like, some of our physicians could bonus on, like, whether it's patient experience, um, meeting care gaps type things. Like, the government will say, like, hey, we want, if X amount of people in your practice are compliant with receiving their flu vaccines and COVID vaccines, like, you know, if all your people meet these standards, then Medicare will sometimes give you money at the end of the year on the back end for doing such a good job. You showing that you take care of your people at a certain level. Um, or you could have to pay money back to Medicare if you suck and provide shitty care. So, but if you did well as a physician, you could bonus for meeting certain standards as it relates to like population health, and that's making sure, like, hey, You know, a majority of our people are compliant. They do what they say we tell them to do, which drives down healthcare costs, whether that be um, getting like breast screenings, colorectal screenings, all that kind of stuff. Um, Early detection means one, you have a better chance of living, but two, you can get it done and you need less treatment if you catch it early, which means less healthcare dollars spent. Um, because the majority of your healthcare dollars spent are near the end of your life. Unless you're a sick person, you spend a lot of time in the hospital. But, you know, I'm just curious why? What what about the VA? Why are they having, is it only this location? Is it all other small towns? I mean, we're not even a small town. We're 100,000 people or more. Probably over 100,000 people. And if they can't get their services here, then they have to drive an hour and a half to 2 hours to Dallas or to maybe Shreveport, like Barksdale Air Force Base, I think. So, and a lot of them can't drive, don't drive, may not have the money to drive. And if not, then they're gonna, you gotta have somebody like me or a family member take off and take them. So they're missing out on money. So yeah, it creates quite of a conundrum. I mean, it's just wild the concept that you have people that raise their hands, swear an oath to protect the freedom and democracy of this nation and the people here. And then when they're done with all that, any injuries and or illnesses sustained or that were a byproduct of doing that job should be taken care of by the government. And even if they're agreeing or doing it, shouldn't it be better? Should it be like, shouldn't the quality be better? I mean, these people swore, took an oath to give everything up to and including their life, their physical existence from this earth, which not only impacts them, but impacts everyone who cares about them, everyone who loves them. And it continues. They come back, they try to get the help they need. They get pills thrown at them. They get people maybe who don't listen. They end up taking their own life. And the pain still continues. It's still being carried by the family. Where are we going wrong? What are we missing? You know, the argument for healthcare in general is that we have the best technology, but we don't live the longest here in America. That's a problem. But now we move it to the VA. It's hard for them to even, you know, I don't know. I mean, I want to say that I think Trump made it to where if you couldn't get in to see the VA or whatever, that you could go to your private doctors and they would pay for it or whatnot, which is helpful. But I mean, you know, that one doctor as well. Oh, yeah, that's as it relates to home health. Every so often, home health has to be recertified and the physicians have to re-sign off on that. And so you think about this one doctor who had all these patients at this one location, you know, it was always having to switch between like the Medicare and the VA, who's going to pay for home health services because it would take so long to get the recertification signed just because they don't have enough people. They don't have enough help. Why? Why? I mean, this is pre government shutdown. They didn't have enough help. Why? Why does nobody want to work there? Why can't they get people? Why can't they keep people? Do our veterans not deserve better? I mean, I'm just curious. It's a valid question. I mean, if the VA, are they not being funded? Do they just not have the funds? Are they just mismanaged? Is it just a shitty place to work? What is the reasoning? They can build a whole new facility, but can't staff it. They can't even keep the one doctor they had. He's going to an urgent care to do shift work. Treat him and treat him. Go home and spend time with his family. So, like, I can't do this. I got 5 years till retirement, and I'm not going to spend them like this. So, yeah, it's gotten worse since a year ago. It was never good. They were good about getting the supplies. Huh. But then that seemed to kind of be a theme as it relates to the government. Surely somebody's profiting off getting the veterans their supplies. I'm sure somebody's got stock in Cardinal or whoever's supplying this shit. they'll get them that, but again, it's the service, the people. So the people at the top, either they're not leading according to the mission statement. I don't know. Does the VA even have a mission statement? Let's look at this. I'm gonna Google. Let's see. Does the VA have a mission statement? I'm gonna have to put my cheaters on for this. Yes, the Department ah of Veterans Affairs has a mission statement that emphasizes its commitment to care for veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors. Their current mission statement is to fulfill President Lincoln's promise to care for those who have served in our nation's military and for their families, caregivers, and survivors. Wow. Hmm. Key aspects of the mission statement: inclusivity. The new statement emphasizes support for women veterans, military caregivers, and survivors, acknowledging the diverse backgrounds of those served. Survey feedback. The mission was developed after surveying approximately 30,000 veterans, ensuring it resonates with the needs and identities of all veterans. Historical context. This updated statement replaces the previous version from 1959, which focused primarily on male veterans and their immediate families. Purpose of the mission statement: communicate the VA's dedication to providing care and support, foster a sense of identity and belonging among veterans and their families, guide the VA's operations and initiatives in serving the veteran community. Hmm. Well, I would say there's a veterans press release here, October 30th. Let's see. May 27th, 2025. Mission statement, core values: integrity, commitment, advocacy, respect, and excellence. Core values define who we are, our culture, and how we care for veterans and eligible beneficiaries. Our values are more than just words, they affect outcomes in our daily interactions with veterans and eligible beneficiaries with each other. Taking the first letter of each word, integrity, commitment, advocacy, respect, and excellence, creates the powerful acronym I CARE that reminds each VA employee of the importance of their role in this department. These core values come together as five promises we make as individuals and as an organization to those we serve. The fucking healthcare system is fucking the military too. Acronyms. This I care bullshit. Um, when I was in, it was ate it. They still had their posters on their wall. We went ate it. What is it? Like introduce yourself, whatever. Acknowledge, introduce, uh, maybe duration, something, expectations, and I don't know. I know they didn't fucking do it. There's always somebody sitting in an office that their whole fucking job is to come up with this bullshit. But it only matters if it were true. Integrity. Act with high moral principle, adhere to the highest professional standards, maintain the trust and confidence of all with whom I engage. I can tell you the nurse visit I had with Buck, and People not wanting to fucking help even get them out? Nope. Commitment. Work diligently to serve veterans and other beneficiaries. Hmm. Be driven by the earnest belief in the VA's mission. Advocacy. Be truly veteran centric by identifying, fully considering, and appropriately advancing the interests of veterans and other beneficiaries. Respect. Blah, blah, blah. Show respect to earn it. Excellent. Strive for the highest quality and continuous improvement. Be thoughtful and decisive in leadership, accountable for my actions, willing to admit mistakes, and rigorous in correcting them. Hmm. Values and goals. Well, you're falling short. Okay. At least where I'm at in East Texas, you're fucking missing the mark. I mean, the country is in a kind of fucked up state as it is with, you know, words that came out of the mouth pre election to what's actually happened post election as it relates to immigration, and I've told you that I have personal, I've been personally affected by that with family, friends, and then the VA. I feel sorry for the people who have to work there. One of my old nurses, his wife works there. I need to ask him, what's going on? What's the deal? Why does nobody want to stay? Why does nobody want to fucking take care of our veterans? The fuck is going on? I mean, you don't have to agree with the government and what they fucking did, the way they left Afghanistan and all that bullshit. But it's not about the government. It's about the fucking people who were there, who sacrificed everything over the people at the top's agenda for power and control. So, I mean, forget the government, forget the circus, you know? It's about the people whose lives will never be the same, all because they were patriotic. They believed in something. They believed in this country. They believed in freedom. The reason I can sit here and say all this is because there are people who raised their hand and said they will. I will. I do. I will give my life if necessary so I can sit here and have a freedom of speech. So I can sit and go see Kyle Smith, like I'm pointing right over here if you're watching, you know? So we can hear great music. So we can not worry about some of the shit that other people in other countries have to worry about. If you haven't traveled to poorer countries, then you don't understand how lucky you are just having been born here in America as a U.S. citizen. Why do you think everybody wants to come here? But that freedom has a cost. And there's a lot of people who paid it. And they're still fucking paying the interest on it every time they transfer from the bed to the wheelchair. Every time they fucking empty their colostomy or urine bag. Every time they put their prosthetic on. They're still fucking paying, okay? And you got people out there like me who are passionate about helping others, not made for the corporate world. So I'm giving where I can by taking care of veterans, taking care of people who don't have anyone, taking care of people who maybe their spouses are too old, too small, but they can't care for them. And when our government does shit like cut hours, it impacts these families. It impacts people like me who want to do this for a living. I mean, it has a huge impact. I mean, unless that's just the government's plan is, well, I guess if we just take less care of them, they'll fucking die off and we won't have to pay for their care, nor will we have to shell out any social security checks and yada, yada, yada. I suppose that's one way to put a dent in the deficit. Would I put it past the government of thinking like that? Absolutely fucking not. Yeah, I don't know. But I do inherently think there's something fucked up about it. Something's amiss. Something's not right. And we need to be doing better. So, I'm calling it out, starting the discussion. I'm out there doing what I can by helping people, taking them to their appointments, doing what I can. I've written many appeal letters for additional hours for these people. And, nothing. But of course, I'm sure the appeal letters went to a fucking empty desk because what was it? Didn't the VA cut like a bunch of fucking jobs like before the election or right after some? I don't know. I know during that process somewhere, yeah, it was before because I was with Buck when I was writing appeal letters. But they slashed a bunch of fucking jobs at the VA, I'm pretty sure. Okay, maybe you want to slash admin and pencil pushers and all that bullshit, but um, you know, top heavy people in power organizations, but you know, you're slashing the the people who need the care and the people providing the care. That's who's being affected. Meanwhile, the people at the top making all these decisions, they're still sitting fat collecting their big fat fucking paychecks. They got rid of a lot of people, maybe in the middle, but then decided to slash all the hours so the veterans and the caretakers aren't, they're the ones who suffer, the people at the bottom. And, I mean, it's not even about me as the caretaker. There's plenty of people to take care of. But the people who need taken care of, that's who's suffering. Less hours. I mean, I do what I can, and I can assure you I do it for way less than what I'm worth. But, I have a family too. I have bills to pay too. I have to get paid too. I'm not asking for much, you know. I have low overhead. But yeah, what I am asking is what's wrong and how do we fix it? What's the problem? So, anyone with some inside information or anyone who has a passion and who thinks our veterans deserve more or better, especially in the rural areas, then I hope you listen to this. I hope we can start a discussion. I hope that we can have some ideas. I hope we can bring some things to light. That's all I'm looking to do here is get the discussion started, get the ball rolling. Because there's people with much more influence and power that could maybe get this message to the right people and find out the answers or get the ball moving in the right direction. But yeah, especially when I was with Buck last year, and I can remember going back and I think about that episode, how pissed I was that day of like, this is a 97-year-old retired commander, U.S. Naval Academy class of 49. And you won't even fucking help me get him out of the car. Yeah, it was disappointing. Wouldn't help me get him back in the car either. Oh, we can't help anybody in the parking lot. It's a liability. Stop it. Okay? Cut the shit. Yeah, we have a problem in America. I'm 49. This is not the America I remember growing up in the 80s and the 90s. The patriotism I felt in, man, yeah, I don't know. I think it used to mean something to be American, and I think it still does, but not in the same way, if that makes sense. But there's nothing more than I would love to see patriotism come back, self pride, self respect in what you do, no matter what it is. Whether you're serving hamburgers or changing my oil or whatever. I would just like to see personal pride, excellence, and people doing shit with meaning and desire and want to. Yeah, I would like to see that again. Right now, it's just a cesspool of division with hardly anybody even sitting to willing to sit down and hear what the other person has to say. But we're so divided and way off course that we're not, this is not how we're going to get better and solve shit. So we got to open the discussion. We got to talk. We got to hear each other out. We got to come up with solutions. Same goal. We got to remember we're on the same team with the same goal, which is, that everybody benefits. Everybody gets something out of it, right? Like if we're going to have a transaction, you know, you're getting my money maybe, and I'm getting whatever you got. Maybe you got some good tacos or good barbecue. Or maybe you got a good ear to listen to and you're thoughtful and you got good advice. Or you play good music like Kyle Smith, you know? Whatever it is. We got to get back to that. Some gratefulness, some love, some appreciation. So it's out there. It's out there. I try to make it a point as I'm Ubering when I'm picking up or I'm dropping off that trying to make sure it's a good interaction and a positive one and a loving one and kind and caring and compassionate. All the things I want to stand for. But on that note, yeah, I don't know. It's just a super hard time right now. See a lot of things I don't like. And I know we can do better. We have the best technology. We don't live the longest. We have the best technology to be connected. And we're so disconnected. So we got a problem. Our priorities are not where they need to be, clearly, as a society, as a nation. So until next time, go out and be the person that you want to meet. And if you're a veteran, you know a veteran, share this episode. And I'd like to hear your thoughts. on if you've received good care, bad care, what you think the issues are. Maybe you work at the VA and have a insight. Maybe I'm totally off. Maybe I'm living in my own world and I'm seeing falsely. Maybe, but I don't think so. So if I am, I know the internet loves to be right and correct me. So if the VA is so awesome and so great, then come on with it. Tell me, show me. I want to believe. Because if it can be great wherever you are, then it can be great here. We need to figure out how and why. So, like I said, go out and be the person that you want to meet. Peace.